Okay, so welcome to this remote workshop for After Effects. I'm going to show you now what we're going to create. We're going to create just the motion graphics part of this, and I will provide an additional workshop on the lighting effects at a later point. All right, so as you can see, I animated our MediaLab logo to sort of enter from two different directions onto the screen, and then they sort of aligned into the MediaLab logo that we know. So let's go ahead and first open After Effects. And I'll walk you through what the interface looks like and what the various panels are supposed to be used for. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create a new composition. So we'll just say new project first. And projects can have multiple compositions, so even when we create a new project, we still have to click this new composition button right here. And let's name this something like After Effects Demo or Test or whatever you want to call it. And I'll walk you through some of these settings here. So this preset is one that I like, which is why it defaulted to that preset. So if you click, you can see that there's a lot of different presets here, but I like this HD TV 1080, which is the resolution. So high definition television, 1080 is our resolution, and 29.97 is our frame rate, which is standard for video. As you can see now, because I selected that preset, it's giving me a width of 1920 and a height of 1080. That's where that 1080 comes from. And those are 1080 pixels, and square pixels is good. The frame rates is 29.97, which is almost 30, which is the standard. Again, you can drop it down to something more cinematic, like 24, 25, but for our intents and purposes, we're going to keep it on 29.97. Don't worry about this drop frame setting. It's not a huge deal. And let's start out by making our composition 10 seconds long. You can change your composition settings at any time. Our background color is going to be black. Yeah, and I think that's everything that we need to look at. I'm not going to go through any of these other more advanced settings. So we'll say OK. And now, depending on which computer you're using, your interface might look different from mine. So that we all see the same thing, go up to Window, select Workspace, and put it on default. And just in case it's already on default and some people sort of move some things around, we're going to reset the default to the saved layout, which is this sort of interface that you see right here. So I'm going to introduce the panels here. So over here on the left, this is where our various files and visual and audio assets are going to be. So things like audio clips you want to bring in, songs, videos. This can even bring in and completely read working files like a .ai or PSD file. So Photoshop and Illustrator files are just fine to bring in here. You don't have to export it as a JPEG or anything like that, but you can also bring in JPEGs. And that's actually what we're going to do. We're going to bring in, actually not a JPEG, but an EPS file, which is basically a fancy vector file. And you can find this both in the MediaLab internal branding, or I don't know what that Google Drive is called, but I'll also put this up on the MediaLab projects shared drive with a folder that says something like After Effects Demo. So I'm going to import file, and just notice multiple files means that you can choose files from multiple locations. If you have multiple files in the same location, you can just hit File and actually hold down Shift to select multiple files. So as you can see in my downloads, I have this MediaLab logo horizontal.eps. And again, so this is just a fancy vector file. It means that the background's going to be transparent instead of white, and it's going to be able to read the vector art that's in here. So I'm going to import that. And the way I'm going to get it over to my composition window, which similar to that in Premiere, is just going to preview what everything's going to look like. Over here, think of this panel as kind of like in Photoshop when you have your layers panel. We're going to have each of the layers that constitute our composition over here, and then finally over here will be the timeline. We're not going to mess with any effects today, so you shouldn't have to worry about this upper right-hand panel. So for the media logo, I'm just going to click and drag it over to my composition, and you can kind of see what it looks like. So we have this MediaLab logo with this black background, and I actually want a white background instead. So I could go into my composition settings and change the background to white, but instead I'm actually going to create a new layer. So my layer, when I click on layer, we're going to go to new, you can see all of the different kinds of layers that you can create. You can create a layer just for text, a layer, just a solid color layer, which is what we'll be doing. But if you keep looking, you can create a light, you can create a camera, which will change the viewpoint of your video. A null object is only for special circumstances, and that's more of an advanced feature. Shape layer, if you're going to actually draw directly onto After Effects, you would select the shape layer. I'll explain a little bit more about why you need the shape layer in a little bit. An adjustment layer, similar to Photoshop, if you want to do things like adjust the contrast of your entire composition or of all layers that are underneath that adjustment layer. And then we won't go into these other two. So let's select the solid layer. And if it isn't already selected, click on the color and type in 6 Fs to create a white solid color. You can name it something if you want. Let's name it background. And you can click make composition size if you notice that the size of it is not the same as your composition. And we're going to click OK. Okay, so now I've put in a background above the MediaLab logo, so we're going to have to reorder these. So I just simply click on the word background and I drag it underneath the MediaLab logo behind it. Okay, so now I have my MediaLab logo on a white background. We're going to animate the MediaLab typeface and the MediaLab logo separately. So we're actually going to create two different layers of this MediaLab logo.eps. So I'm going to go ahead and click and drag another instance of this logo onto my timeline. So now I have two, but I can of course rename it, and I'll rename it by right clicking, and I'll select rename, and I can type in something like ML typeface, and I'll right click on the other one and I will rename it ML bubble for that speech bubble. So now we need to constrain what we see on each of these layers to only that aspect of the design that this refers to. So for this one, for MediaLab typeface, I need to crop out everything except for the word MediaLab. And so this is where I'll explain a little bit about shapes and shape layers. So unless I'm creating a shape layer, which again you get by going to layer, new, and you notice this shape layer here. So unless I'm creating that in drawing directly on the shape layer, all of my shape tools and also my pen tool, those are going to be treated as masks. So because I'm putting this on a layer that has art on it, it's not a shape layer, it's going to mask out everything except for the thing that I draw this rectangle around. So right now I need to draw a rectangle with this rectangle tool around the word MediaLab. It's right there. And the reason why you can't tell the difference is because the MediaLab logo of the other layer is behind it. So if I turn off visibility of that other MediaLab logo, we can see now it's masking out the rest of the logo. So if I were to expand this or move it, you can see that this is just simply creating a window through which I can only see the thing that I select. So I've gone ahead and done that. I'm going to turn visibility back on and maybe turn visibility off of the typeface layer and click onto my MediaLab bubble layer. And I'm going to do the same thing, but instead I'm going to draw a rectangle around just the MediaLab bubble. So without that other logo showing through, this is kind of what masking looks like in After Effects. Okay, so now as you can see, I have one layer with just the bubble and one layer with just the typeface on it. Okay, so I had to leave and come back because I had to change locations because my partner started talking really loudly on the phone. So the video starts when both of these assets are off of the screen. So we need to get them to start off of the screen. So let's zoom out a little. This is where you can sort of choose how far you're zooming in. I'm going to reduce the zoom to 50. Now I can kind of see what's going on, and now we will start with moving this MediaLab bubble off screen. I'm going to expand it, and you can see now that we have a transform layer, and we also have a mask layer. It only has this mask layer here because I've put a mask on it. If I didn't, it would not be there. All we'd have is transform. So every layer comes with this transform panel, and it will sort of give all of these characteristics so that I can manually change. So if you notice the position, we have these X and Y coordinates where this MediaLab M bubble is positioned. So if we know that the top left corner of our screen is 0, 0, then we need to take the Y coordinate and we need to move it into the negatives. We need to move it down. So one thing I can do is I can click until I see these double-sided arrows on my mouse, and then I can basically drag towards the left to reduce the value, and of course you would drag to the right to increase the value. And I might need to do that a couple times. I can also click and just type in like 0, enter, and it'll move there, but obviously that's not quite enough, so we need to move it even more into the negatives. All right, so then of course we need to do the same thing with this MediaLab typeface. But instead we know that the MediaLab typeface moves horizontally from the left, so we're instead going to take the X coordinates and reduce those. So let's start, just to save the effort, by typing in 0, and then I'll start to click and drag. And I need to do that a little more. And again, once more. Okay, so now we can see that our timeline is at 0 and nothing's on the screen, which is good. So in order to animate, you need to create what are called keyframes, which are going to tell After Effects where your design assets are going to be located at specific times, at specific points on your timeline. So we need to create a keyframe right here for each of these assets that basically says when this is at the start of this video, both of these locations should be off screen. So let's start with the typeface because that's the one that moves first. And in order to basically create automatic keyframes for whenever I move this asset, I'm going to turn on the stopwatch. Basically, the stopwatch automatically creates keyframes. So notice that it's created a keyframe at 0 seconds. And then anytime I move it, it's also going to create another keyframe. So to create another keyframe, we need to move forward and we need to think, okay, how long do we want this MediaLab typeface to move in from the left? Let's just try 2 seconds. And from here, just to make sure I don't accidentally pull the Y value up or down as I'm manually dragging this, I'm still going to use this position. So I'm going to click and drag to the right to increase the value. And I want it to come in. And I can even see the outline of the MediaLab bubble above it. So I'm going to just go right to the edge of that line. And there we have it. There is an automatic keyframe that After Effects has inserted because I started the stopwatch on position. Now, the way that it's created this animation is it goes evenly from left to right. So the way I have it now, it comes from left to right, and then it comes to a very abrupt stop. I'll show you one more time. So let's say I don't want it to come to that abrupt stop. I want it to kind of ease into its final location. What I'm going to do is right click on my keyframe, and I'll get this alternative menu, and I'll go to Keyframe Assistant. And there are 3 options here. We have an easy ease in, an easy ease out. They call it an easy ease because there was a more difficult way to make eases in your animation. But I don't think they have that old method anymore. But regardless, it's still called easy ease. So easy ease is it's going to start to slow down. Like let's say for easy ease in, it's going to start to start its movement slowly. Whereas easy ease out, it's going to end its movement more slowly. Easy ease just goes in either direction. So it doesn't really matter if I do easy ease or easy ease out because this MediaLab typeface isn't going to be moving any more than this. So I'll just do easy ease. You can see now that it's sort of this hourglass shape. And that's because it's showing me that it's easing in and out, which doesn't really matter because it's not going to move any further than that. But if we now play this and we see the animation, I'll play it one more time. You can kind of see. So it's not as abrupt of a stop. There are ways to manually change how much it eases. But we're not going to get into that right now. I'll just say that each of these lines, or each of these dots on this line, represent a different location where the MediaLab logo is going to be. So as you can see, it starts off kind of spaced out, and then as it gets more towards its final location, these dots get closer together, and that's the easing out of the animation. So you can do things like click and drag to create different stretches, but I'm not going to do that right now. We can revisit that at an advanced After Effects workshop if people want that. All right, so now I'm back again. I had to cut out and restart because now my cat is in my lap. So if you're hearing any weird noises or you're hearing me talk to someone, that would be my cat who's trying to get my attention in my lap. Okay, so we effectively moved the MediaLab typeface in and out. And now we need to do the same thing with the MediaLab bubble. So let's close all of the sub layers under the MediaLab typeface, and let's open the sub layers of the MediaLab bubble. And we will expand transform. And whatever I was doing, I lost my starting point for the MediaLab bubble. So I now need to move this Y value down. And okay, we're right here. All right, so same thing. We're going to turn on the stopwatch on the position. And what I can actually do is open this up just slightly, and we can see that around 2 seconds is where the other MediaLab logo came in from the left, and I can even scrub forward in my timeline and kind of see where that happens. And it stops right around there. Let's take about that long to first bring the MediaLab bubble down. So I don't have to create a new keyframe. I've come forward in my timeline, and now I'm going to increase my Y value, and it's going to automatically put a keyframe right there for it. Okay, so I'm going to bring it down a little bit, and I'm also going to now rotate my MediaLab bubble just slightly. We're going to pull it towards the left so that it comes down a little bit wonky. Maybe a little bit more. We want to make it look like it's bouncing off of the floor that's represented by the bottom of the MediaLab typeface. So that looks pretty good. Let's now turn on the stopwatch for rotation so that we can then bring it back to where it's supposed to be. Okay. So the first thing that it's going to do is we want the MediaLab bubble to kind of bounce up a little bit. So let's maybe bring this to 3 seconds, and let's now bring in, let's decrease the Y value just to get that little bounce, and then maybe, I don't know, 3/4 of a second after that is when it finally comes back down. And I'm not going to bring it down all the way because I have a feeling that now if I change this rotation back to 0, so turns out that the Y position needs to come down a little bit more, and it's right there. Okay, so now I've effectively created keyframes on both the rotation and on the position, particularly the Y position of this MediaLab bubble. So let's see if we need to add any eases here. I think we will at least need to add one at the very end, but let's just see. Yeah, so it's a little jerky. Let's see. Why don't we change at least this final position? Let's add an ease in right there. Again, we can add an easy ease or an ease in. It doesn't really matter. And let's see. Sometimes I have to play it a couple times and just get a feel for what needs to happen. I mean, that looks pretty good to me, actually. The only thing I would say is maybe these final few keyframes need to be closer together. I kind of would like that bounce to happen a little bit more quickly, but let's just confirm that there's nothing else going on with this. I think that looks pretty good in terms of the easing. So to select multiple keyframes, I could hold down Shift, which I'm doing, and click on all the keyframes, but what I like to do is just take my arrow key and draw a selection box around all of them, and then let's just bring these in a little bit, and then maybe I'm going to click to deselect and now just select this middle one and move that directly into the middle. And now we'll see if that's better. I have a feeling I might want to speed it up a little bit more. Actually, that looks pretty good to me. Let's watch it one more time. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so that is motion graphics, easing in, easing out. A couple of other things that you can do with this is if you want to kind of alter the path that things take without having to sort of like put in a bunch of like mini position keyframes in between, I can take, let's zoom in a little bit onto, let's go to fit. And so check out, this is the path that my that my MediaLab bubble takes when it falls down from the sky, I can take this handle and I can actually move it in and out to create a curvature. Now it's gonna look a little weird, so let's say I've done that, and let's just now see how it. Yeah, so it kind of bounces all over the place, kind of like a bouncy ball. I don't think I really like that, but you can do that. I'm gonna press Command Z and undo everything I did. One quick thing about this line at the top. You might have noticed this green line. And what this is telling me if things are playing in real time. All the green, everything under the green is playing in real time. When there are gaps or there's this blue situation, either blue or black, it means that there still needs to be additional rendering that needs to happen. And so I could just like scrub through like this to get it to render. The other thing is it will render while it plays. So it's just telling you, oh, and all of the dots disappeared. But if you do see that, if you see little gaps in your green line, just know that the next time you play it, it's going to render it while it plays, which means it might play a little bit jerky. So if things are happening more slowly or more jerkily than you want it to, don't freak out. Wait for it to play all the way through until you get this green line, and then go back and play it again, and it should play just fine. Okay, so now let's get it to fit in. Oh, we are fitting. Okay, so let's just play it one more time and see. Yeah, and that looks pretty good. Now, it turns out we didn't need 10 seconds of this composition. We only really needed like 4 seconds. Although I would argue that maybe if you're doing something like this, which establishes branding, you might want to give your logo some time to linger on screen. So let's actually just end this at 5 seconds. So a couple of things I can do. I can go up to composition. I can go to composition settings, and I can manually enter 5 seconds or 6. What did we say? We said 6. Okay. 6 seconds, and you can see that automatically adjust. Let's say I don't want to do that. And I can also just take my composition, my work area, and drag it in to 6 seconds. And it will automatically end my video at 6 seconds that way. And just to show you, you'll see it loop like that. Okay, so now we're ready to export this if we're happy with how this looks. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through exporting and doing final renders. We'll go to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. I don't mess with Media Encoder. Another thing you can do, though, is you can export it as an Adobe Premiere project. Because the export settings on After Effects are going to be a little bit different than Premiere, and if you like the export settings in Premiere, you can always export it as an Adobe Premiere project, open it in Premiere, and then export it from there. But just to walk you through this, we're going to add it to the render queue, and then the render queue is going to pop up here as an additional tab. And so I have a couple of things that I need to select. The first thing is I need to select the output. I already have a video called After Effects Demo. And in fact, if you haven't named your project, it'll probably say Untitled, and it will really want you to click on this. And I guess my first video is called AE Demo. But okay, so I can call it After Effects Demo. But if you want to change the name or where your file is going to save, you would click on the output to. This is really important because a lot of people export their videos and they don't check where they're exporting to, and then they've effectively lost their video. They can't find it, especially because a lot of people have trouble searching on their computer. So make sure you do click this and select a place that you know you can find later for this to save to or export to. And I'll hit save. And then the other thing is, again, you can create different render settings according to whether this is a final product, whether this is just a sketch that you kind of just want to run by a client, whether this is just something you want to show a teammate. Again, so you can do like draft settings, and you can also just click directly on this and get into the more advanced render settings. So I do want my, I want this at the best quality. I want my resolution to be full, but again, it doesn't have to be if you're exporting a draft for someone. I don't actually see anything else that I would want to change here. You can change the frame rate here. If you're gonna do something different with the frame rate, I would do it in composition settings so that nothing gets messed up with your animation. And then this is like a custom place to start and end where this renders from and to. So if you don't want it to render out your entire composition, you can just have it render out a portion. So that's best settings. But then the output module you will want to click on. So if I click on this, and then I see that it's going to format it as a QuickTime movie. So that's a .mov, which is fine. If I click format options though, one of the things it's going to do is it's going to automatically default to animation. This is going to be a huge file for my computer, and it will take a lot longer to both render and to upload if I need to share it with someone over the cloud. That's because the animation preset is made for actually video game animation, so it's really, really large. We don't need that for these purposes. So I would switch to Apple ProRes 422, which is a very common codec to use, and it doesn't matter if you are on a PC. You can still use Apple ProRes. Okay, and then I will say okay. I can also change my audio output. But actually, this video has no sound, so just to save us all time, we can just turn that off. And then once we hit OK, it will go back to our render queue. So remember, you do have to push render for it to actually render. And it's going to run through my animation as it's rendering and exporting it. And again, it's not rendering it in real time, so it's going to look a little jerky, but that's okay. And again, you can take this as a source video into Premiere and do things like a fade, other things that you know how to do in Premiere. After Effects can do them, but it's just not as good at doing the things that Premiere normally does. And yeah, don't forget that it makes a kind of startlingly loud sound when it's done rendering. And now let's see what that looks like. Okay, this is my After Effects demo.move. Let's see. All right, looks amazing. Looks also like there is a tiny, it looks like there's a tiny little artifact right here that I missed cropping out from this other layer's MediaLab bubble. So yeah, that's something I would need to go back and change. I would just need to change where that mask falls, but we're not going to do that right now. But that's a little bit of an intro to animating graphics in After Effects. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one if you're experiencing any difficulty. All right, thanks.